Hello everyone. This is Mara. Today we are going to talk about the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally versus for the player experience, the user experience, and also in a conclusion, reads, who is this devices for? Many have done before comparisons, but it was mostly in regards to just the software and mostly the hardware. But when you get such a device, you don't really just compare what is stronger. It's obviously the Ally is way stronger than the Steam Deck, but we have to realize that that's not all that matters in this case. So today I'm gonna talk about that. It may be a lengthy video, so grab something to drink and just listen to me. As usual, it's not gonna be any gameplay showing, it's mostly gonna be me talking. So, the first category we're gonna talk about is the device's characteristics. The Steam Deck is using Linux based operating system and they have customized it to the best of their ability to make it a console like experience. Based on the big picture mode that um, they're using features such as quick resume and sleep mode. In general, the vibe that you get with the Steam Deck is a more powerful Switch with better ergonomics and able to customize it most of the experience from fine tuning such things as the battery life when you're adjusting settings to locking the frame rate to the hertz of the screen and capping also the frame rate to have a more stable experience in some games if you don't want to run unlocked frame rate, specifically mostly in my experience with action games. Now, the ROG Ally on the other side is using Windows 11, which they are using a tablet function for the touchscreen. They made the software to be able to control the interface with the buttons, with the controller, and to use the mouse with a joystick. We need to note that Asus did not really mention that it was going to be a console-like experience, and it needs to be noted that it's only 1 month old. So we still don't have also official drivers for the chipset. From the same way, eventually even AMD gave drivers for the Steam Deck chipset for people that wanted to have a dual boot Windows, but it wasn't immediately. So this is mostly on the AMD side. It's not something that ASUS can really control right now. Second category, we're gonna talk about the ergonomics and the usability of the controls. Steam Deck is definitely made for people with more adult sized hands and bigger hands, medium to big hands. Personally, to even be able to play the games on Switch, I had to use the Hori Split Pad Pro, which was like impossible for me to play with the Joy-Cons comfortably. I was constantly after 10 minutes was getting cramps. So this definitely helped me to be able to play portably with the Switch back then. The back paddles for the Steam Deck are pretty good, and you can use it easily with many games that can usually you would want to map extra buttons or functionalities. The ROG Ally is a smaller frame device and which has the better placement in my opinion on the sticks here that you can play first person shooter games. Bigger buttons, see here, bigger buttons. And it best with medium-sized hands, as my bigger hands many times have been kind of toasted from the exhaust up here. Usually when I hover my hand sometimes over here, when I play games comfortably, depends on my grip, I can just like touch the exhaust and it kind of toasts my finger, but that's just really my experience. The massive downside of the ROG Ally is that the macro buttons, you have to kind of be conscious, aware to not hit them during the gameplay, and you have to kind of adjust your grip to not be able to hit them. Now, this won't happen in most games. I believe if you're playing first-person shooter games, you don't really gonna do it. But if you're playing something with the D-pad, especially for the left side, you kind of have to kind of awkwardly adjust your grip. And as you can see, like from my side, kind of awkward to show. But it is harder when you get your grip down like this. Use the D-pad. It's not as good as when you have it up. Now, the third category. What is the gameplay demographic and what accommodations the companies have made for the devices? Steam Deck's biggest weakness is the multiplayer games. Because of so many games these days using the anti-cheat software, and at the moment of recording, this has not really been fixed for most of the games using the anti-cheat. This has made a big damage to the games that Steam Deck can play. Developers can overcome this. I have read how developers can actually make it compatible, but most actually that just doesn't bother to make them compatible for the Steam Deck. It is still a very low user base compared to everything else on the ecosystem. Valve, with their shaders that they release for the games, fix a lot of problems that games can have with performance. I still remember being able to play the first boss in Elden Ring, the Horseman. You could play it without freezing all the time. Compared to PC, that was still an issue for quite longer, while you could play it just fine on the Steam Deck, because Valve was aware of the issue. They made some shaders compilation and they were able to help the game play fixed using that. That was something that really made me want to get the Steam Deck from back then. But that also becomes a problem because of the instability of the games when they update. That can happen like when you're playing a game and suddenly the game updates and then it won't work with the Proton layer, and then you have to go to Proton G, you have to update, hopefully it will support the game, and then you will be able to play it. Same with a lot of third-party launchers. That is kind of the Steam Deck's bane. The launchers really are a weakness of this device. We know it for a long time, but they have made strides to make it better, but it's still there. For those reasons, I believe that the Steam Deck mostly opts for the single-player game experiences and just logs there. On the other hand, the ROG Ally biggest strength is being a Windows device, and that there is not really compatibility issues. Games unplayable on the Steam Deck can be fully functional and run with great performance. You can play games from any launcher, and you won't risk any bans that sometimes can happen on the Steam Deck in games such as Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail. And as long as there is gamepad support or even Steam input for some games that support that, the game will work. Conclusion: who are these devices for? Steam Deck is the entry device to PC gaming for console players. It can work mostly out of the box, but with little more effort, such as setting up the Proton G, using Desky and input on the add-ons, and installing ROG utilities, you can have a way better performance for emulation, AAA games on the deck, because those things will help you squeeze the most out of the device, and it will make it easier for you to play some games that were not able to play before. For example, if you see playing Hogwarts game with and without the cryo utilities, it's a huge difference. This device is mostly for people that wanna play single player games and are fine with mostly running things below 60 frames and willing to adjust into learning a new operating system such as Linux. The ROG Ally is as advertised, a laptop shrink down to a different form factor. With greater power on the APU, you can even have a good docked experience on 1080p to use it as like a travel PC. Have it with you, not just travel PC, like you can use it for productivity and everything like that. You can use the Steam Deck like that as well, but you will have to learn new applications. So it's not as easily adjustable, but unless you are already in the Linux ecosystem, I'm saying this assuming that you may have a computer before that is using Windows for work. It is expected of the user though to be familiar with Windows setup, or at least willing to learn from device setup videos. After the setup, you may want to run a debloater, turn off the CPU boost, adjust to increase performance as much as possible using those tricks. If you want to play multiplayer games and use your Game Pass on this device, the device will mostly play everything. This device is mostly for people that wanna play multiplayer games with no restrictions. As you can see, a lot of people playing Warzone, Modern Warfare 2, and many other multiplayer kind of games in this device. You can play the Game Pass games as you want, and mostly I would say that this device is mostly for people that want the extra power that the Steam Deck right now cannot provide. So for example, I can play 720p on this device, Path of Exile with 100 plus frames per second, sometimes even higher, and I'm not even talking about using the full power, I'm talking about 18 watts. And that is the difference for playing a multiplayer game that you can play it on the Steam Deck, but because of the Proton layer and because of sometimes just the performance is not really there for these kind of games, it can chalk it up and it won't really work even close. I believe for at least the conclusion that I'm gonna reach, when you're trying to play AAA games on both of devices, unless you try to cap it to a frame rate that you want specifically, I believe that the performance on the battery kind of gonna be the same. I'm talking about AAA games. But when you're going to lower games, the Steam Deck definitely outperforms battery-wise, because it's just more optimized so far to use better the battery, downloads, and everything like that. Now, the conclusion is already reached. I believe I have made a good assessment of what both devices can do, and not really just theorize about the power, because when you get, for example, something like a Switch, you don't get it because you expect to play lower power games. That is not the point. You get it because you want to get into that ecosystem and you like most likely the first party games and the form factor and the way that you can dock it and the support and everything like that. that is how I believe we should approach the devices, because obviously this device is stronger than the Steam Deck, obviously just from the specs alone. But in some games, for example, in my experience, Elden Ring. Now, Elden Ring is not the most optimized game, but for example, using the Elden Ring, if you get this device just to play Elden Ring, is a waste. Just keep playing on the Steam Deck. Even if you have lower input lag on this device and everything, it's still not worth it just to play, because this device as well doesn't play it perfectly 60 frames per second at the moment. At the moment that we don't have official drivers yet and everything. But my point in all this is that this device, I would suggest someone that has a Steam Deck to get it for different games, for the games that the other device cannot play. Don't get it to just play a little bit better. Now, if the game that you want to play on Steam Deck plays only like 20 frames, then okay, of course. But if it's above 30 FPS and it's playable like that, and we're not talking about competitive games, but mostly single player games, then I would suggest to just stay with the Steam Deck. You're gonna have better experience overall if you are already there. This was the video. Hope everyone has a great time. If you liked the video, like it. If you didn't like it, dislike it. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe. Have a great day.